The MLB trade deadline is here, and the Atlanta Braves just didn't do enough. Unless things change here quickly as we are recording at the time of the deadline, Braves didn't do enough at this MLB trade deadline. We'll discuss all that, what other teams did, what other NL wildcard contenders did, all that on today's MLB trade deadline episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Follow the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button and make sure you leave me a 5-star review wherever you listen to Locked On Braves. Thank you so much for your support and making us your first listen of each and every day. Now, full disclosure, I am recording this at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern as the trade deadline is ending, and there's always moves coming in afterwards. But as we start this, Atlanta Braves didn't do enough at the trade deadline. We'll discuss what they did do once again in the Soler move, and we'll talk about anything else that comes in. But we'll get into all the other deals that went down, what the Braves could have done, maybe should have done. We'll discuss everything MLB trade deadline related on today's episode. And this episode of Locked On Braves is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, recording this as the deadline passes here, some moves are still trickling in. But at this point, the only move the Braves have made is Jorge Soler. And I did an entire podcast earlier Tuesday morning breaking that trade down. So I was planning on talking nothing but Braves trade deals in this first segment here, but as of things right now, as we are 4 minutes past the trade deadline, nothing has happened. So let's jump into what has happened, because while it's been a quiet deadline for the Atlanta Braves, there have been a ton of moves. So let's talk about some of those moves, including the biggest one that just went down: the Dodgers getting Jack Flaherty from the Detroit Tigers. And in that deal, the Tigers getting Theron Lorenzo and Trey Sweeney. I've heard of Sweeney's name before, but I really don't know enough about either two of those guys to say, what type of package that is. But Jack Flaherty does get dealt one of the biggest names out there at the trade deadline. He's having a resurgent season for the Tigers, and he's a rental player, so you figured he wouldn't cost too much. Again, I don't know enough about the prospects to say anything about that deal. But that is the biggest move, obviously, to come down here at the deadline, with several others. Before we get into some of those other trades, and I'm watching right now just making sure nothing else comes in, I see Joseph Hardigree saying Braves are punting. Lone Wolf saying one trade is surprising from AA. Doodle Dot, I hate to say it, this should be Snit's last year with the Braves. A lot of people down, and I get it. I'm down on it as well. Jessica saying, I agree, didn't nearly do enough. I'll say this, and I've said this on radio shows, I've said it on the podcast. Was this the year that you really should go all in at the trade deadline with all the issues this Braves team has had, the struggles they've had offensively, the injuries they've had? Was this the deadline that you really push all the chips in to go get a Garrett Crochet? And maybe you think that is, and I'm not saying one way or the other if they should have done that or not necessarily. So I'm kind of, hedging my comment here. But it's just, it doesn't feel like this is that year for the Atlanta Braves. They are holding on to a wild card spot at the moment. It's not like they are trying to put the final touches on a World Series, favorite. And, maybe some national outlets still have the Braves as one of the favorites to reach the World Series. Haven't looked at FanDuel's World Series odds here in a little bit. But this is a team that is holding on for dear life for a postseason spot. And so you can look at it one of two ways. You can look at it maybe in a more pessimistic way and saying the Braves are done. They're punting. This isn't the year that they should go out and make these moves. Or you can look at it on the other end and say, look, they've weathered the storm with all these injuries they've had. They just need a little bit of help. And you didn't get that at the deadline. Again, at least at this point, moves could still come in. Usually we see them trickle in 10 to 15 minutes after the deadline. But as of this moment, all you've done is gotten Jorge Soler. And I think that move alone, as I talked about on this morning's podcast, raises some serious questions about this team and the construction of this team. Because, yes, he gives you a guy that can get on base and has a walk percentage over 10%, which is great because this team as a whole has a walk percentage of 7%. They don't get on base enough. And Soler certainly helps you do that. But it's also a guy who strikes out a lot, doesn't hit for high average, and he does bring some power, even though the power's been down a little bit this year, but power's been down for a lot of really good power hitters this season. So if Jorge Soler is the only move you make at this deadline, that feels pretty underwhelming for me, for the Atlanta Braves. Again, hopefully something else happens here in the next couple of minutes. Doodle Dad saying the Braves don't have anything to trade. That's not true. That's just simply not true. You have a J.R. Ritchie, you have an Owen Murphy, who I know is out right now. You have an A.J. Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop, who I don't necessarily want to move, but those are pretty big trade chips. You have a Nacho Alvarez, who you can move. I know you're using him right now, but you could go with Whit Merrifield and hope that Ozzie comes back at the end of the season, or you could go out and get somebody like a Rengifo, like an IKF, who did get moved. But to this point, they didn't. And you certainly have the prospects to make those types of deals happen. So I don't believe that narrative that the Braves don't have the pieces to go out and make a trade. They do. Are you willing to give those up? And, the answer right now from Alex Anthopoulos is no. He'd rather go out and take on money and get a Jorge Soler. So, again, moves are still trickling in. We'll have some more stuff happening. If you're here with me live and you see something come across that I'm mentioning or I'm not mentioning, let me know. But at this point, those are the moves that have been made for the Braves, and nothing happening there. We got a couple other deals coming after the deadline. The Phillies make a small move, or they get Tanner Banks, another reliever there. The Giants get Mark Canha from the Tigers. So this is almost hilarious to me, because the Giants trade Jorge Soler and his money, $16 million each of the next 2 years. They trade him to the Braves, and then they go out and get Mark Canha, who, look, I'm going to be honest, and some people have said maybe there's some concerns with Mark Canha in the clubhouse. I haven't heard of those. I'm not aware of those. Look, if you didn't have previous relationships with Jorge Soler, is Mark Canha that worse of an option for you? So the Giants trade Jorge Soler in a money dump, and then they go out and get Mark Canha, who is a bit more of a well-rounded hitter, doesn't have the power, but a guy that can get on base for you, has some more speed, can be a better outfielder for you. Well, not a great outfielder, but better than what Jorge Soler gives you. So that move is kind of hilarious to me, because the Giants trade Soler in a money dump, and then they go out and get Mark Canha. I think you could say that the Braves probably just should have went out and got Mark Canha if that was an option. Maybe I'm wrong. I certainly hope I'm wrong in that regard, but that one kind of caught me off guard there. Matthew Davis saying, I'll take Soler over Canha. I think in a vacuum, yes, you would. I think Soler, I think it's close. I think it's probably closer than you're thinking. But, if you're asking me straight up and no money involved, nothing like that, would I rather have Soler or Canha? I'd probably take Soler, but I think it's a lot closer than you're thinking. If you look at the numbers, and again, just getting somebody who can get on base, because that's, what you're looking for. And I guess you're hoping for a little bit more power from Soler. But Mark Canha is a guy that can get on base at 337 on base this year, at 355 on base last year, at 367 on base the year before that. He doesn't give you a lot of power. He's a guy that can get to double-digit steals. The average is down this year, but somebody that's usually around 250, 260. Again, I'm not saying I'd rather straight up have Mark Canha, but I think it's very similar types of moves with him and Jorge Soler. And again, it's just funny to me that Giants trade Jorge Soler, and then they go get Mark Canha, who's a cheaper option. All right, we'll get into some of the moves that have been made, because there were a ton happening on the MLB trade deadline. Again, not a lot happening with the Braves. We'll talk about what the other NL wildcard teams did, because, look, they all made significant moves, and several moves to upgrade their teams. Talking about the Mets, the Padres, the Pirates going out and making moves. All these teams going out and making moves to help their chances of getting a wild card spot. And yet the Braves, not much of nothing. So we'll talk about all of that here next. When you're at a ballpark, what's your favorite cold treat to go to? For me, when I'm at Truist, I got to find that Mayfield cart. I got to get me a helmet bowl of cookies and cream ice cream. That's what I love to go for. When you're taking in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV's Popsicle Firecracker flavor, a summer hit from Liquid IV. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. And this is another one of those partners that my wife just absolutely loves. It's made my life better as well because she is happy to take my samples. I didn't even get to try them because she just took them for herself. She loves the lemon lime flavor. You can find all your favorite flavors on their website, whether it's berry, lemon lime, pina colada, so much more. You just tear, pour, live more. 1 stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Powered by LIV Hydroscience, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV, and get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use our code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from the free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. All right, thank you so much for joining me here on this Trade Deadline podcast. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, or you can get coverage like this 24/7 on YouTube or in the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. We'll have one more podcast this week. We'll have a mailbag episode likely Thursday morning, so get your questions submitted for that, or get ready to submit your questions for that. Now let's jump back into the trade deadline here. Again, moves still coming in. You see the Diamondbacks getting Dylan Floro. That's another NL wildcard team that's making a move. The Reds trade for Austin Slater. The Reds are even further back. They're 4 games back in the NL wildcard race, and they go out and make a move for Austin Slater. Mentioned already I mentioned already about the Jack Flaherty deal to the Dodgers, and so many more coming in. Sorry, trying to keep track with all of these right now. And then you also got Mark Canha, who went to the Giants. But let's talk about some of the other moves that happened earlier today. I'm going to run through all of these. So many trades happening. I've never seen a trade deadline that was this active. And, that's what you get. You got so many teams who are in it for a playoff spot. There's not a lot of sellers, which I think drove the price of this market. Some of these prices are just ridiculous. But you got teams like the Marlins and the Rays who are just selling off everything. And you got a lot of teams that are willing to buy. The Rays, who did a lot of selling, they also go out and get Dylan Carlson from the Cardinals. Talked about Dodgers getting Jack Flaherty. The Dodgers also got Kevin Kiermaier from the Blue Jays. The Orioles got Eloy Jimenez from the White Sox. Orioles made a lot of good moves at the deadline. The Phillies got Tanner Banks from the White Sox. Mets get Huascar Brazaban from the Marlins. Marlins, again, just got rid of everything. I don't know who the Braves are going to face this weekend, but I also didn't realize. I knew Brazaban's there, but I guess I didn't realize we have 2 Huascars in MLB right now. Pirates get IKF from the Blue Jays. Pirates also get Brian De La Cruz from the Marlins for Yun Sok Shim. The Padres get Tanner Scott and Brian Hoeing from the Marlins for Robbie Snelling, Adam Mazur, Graham Pauley, and Jay Bashirs. I don't know a lot about prospects, but I recognize at least the first 3 of those names. Padres, are not shy about trading away prospects. That's a pretty big package there for a couple of relievers. The Twins got Trevor Richards from the Blue Jays for Jay Harry. Rangers got Andrew Chafin from the Tigers. Mets got Paul Blackburn from the A's for Cade Morris. Royals loved what the Royals did. They got Paul DeJong from the White Sox for Gerald Rosado. They also got Lucas Ursig from the A's for Mason Barnett, Will Klein, and Jared Dickey. I love Lucas Ursig. If you are a Braves fan, you probably remember him breaking onto the scene last year with the A's. A lot of talk about Mason Miller over there with the A's. Lucas Ursig can be just as electric over there. I really like that as a sneaky arm for the Braves, but the Royals go out and get him. They desperately needed bullpen help, and I love to see a team like the Royals and the Pirates with the moves that they're making going for it at the deadline. I think this is a good product of the expanded postseason, if I don't love it overall as a purist baseball fan. But you got a team like the Royals who are in a spot with a young, talent like Bobby Witt Jr. that they have locked up, and you got a chance to get in the postseason, and they go out and give up their fourth best prospect in Mason Barnett, another top 20 prospect in Will Klein, and Jared Dickey, the former Tennessee Volunteer, to get a really solid back of the bullpen arm that you have control over for a while. So I love that move for the Royals. Guardians got Alex Cobb from the Giants. The Diamondbacks got Josh Bell from the Marlins, as they have some injury news on Christian Walker, so just getting some insurance there. The Orioles get Trevor Rogers from the Marlins for Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers. Trevor Rogers is at best a mid-rotation starter, and the Marlins just got two top 100, top 150 prospects for Trevor Rogers. The prices were very high, especially for starting pitching at this deadline. Red Sox got former first-round pick from the Braves, Lucas Sims from the Reds, and the Yankees got Mark Leiter Jr., another sneaky bullpen pickup. They got him from the Cubs for Ben Cowles and Jack Neely. So those were all the trades happening on the deadline day. Phillies also here after the deadline, they have traded Gregory Soto to the Orioles. The Orioles and Phillies again hooking up on a deal. The Phillies getting a prospect in return for that. The Diamondbacks acquired Dylan Fleur from the Nationals. Might have already said that one. But again, got some more deals that are still trickling in here, still hoping we see something from the Atlanta Braves. But at this point, I'm not seeing anything right now, which is very, very discerning. I see David O'Brien, The Athletic, saying the Braves didn't make any last-minute trades today. For those wondering, Lopez tentatively set to start Saturday. Alex Anthopoulos freed through a bullpen and felt good. Braves are below the third luxury tax threshold and tend to stay below it. So that is very interesting. We talked about this morning, that deal for Jorge Soler. It's not as much money for this season that many people maybe thought it would be. So I thought there was a chance. And, all the numbers that we're looking at for luxury tax threshold are, just projections. But, Alex Anthopoulos saying that they are under that third luxury tax threshold and they intend to stay there. So that kind of answers some questions for why we didn't see more moves at this deadline. They wanted to stay under that third luxury tax threshold. And look, you're going to have people come in and say, spend more money, the Braves are cheap. We are talking about the Braves not wanting to go into the third luxury tax threshold. They have spent money. They have spent a lot of money to build this team. And there were times not too long ago where I thought this Braves team would never go into the luxury tax at all. And here we are talking about them potentially going into the third luxury tax, which it sounds like they are not willing to do. They don't want to give up those 10 spots in the MLB draft and pay that heightened surcharge. So that's pretty big news right there from David O'Brien, saying that they are not over that third luxury tax threshold and they intend not to go there. So again, makes a lot of sense why there weren't more moves made. But we'll get into this more here in a second. I want to get into what the other NL wildcard teams did, and then I'll finish up talking more about that and just the Braves trade deadline overall. But looking at the NL wildcard teams, the Mets went out. They got Tyler Zuber, another reliever. They got Paul Blackburn, a depth starter. They got Jesse Winker, a guy that I really wanted for the Braves. They get another reliever in Ryan Stanek, a reliever in Phil Maton, and a reliever in Huascar Brazoban. So they go out and get a ton of pitchers. They get Jesse Winker to help them in the outfield. Unfortunately, I like what the Mets did here. The Cardinals, they go out with one move, and I think Braves fans would have taken this over what the Braves actually did. You do this move, and obviously it was a complicated three-team trade, but if the Braves would have made a deal with the White Sox to just go get Eric Fetty and Tommy Pham, would you have been more pleased with that than just the one deal for Jorge Soler? And I'd rather have Soler than Tommy Pham, don't get me wrong. But with one move, the Cardinals essentially went out and addressed the depth in the rotation and addressed the outfield with one move. and didn't take on a lot of money in that deal. Would you, as a Braves fan, had rather just make one move with the White Sox to get Eric Fedde and Tommy Pham? Obviously, there potentially are some clubhouse issues with Pham that maybe doesn't make him an option for the Braves. But would you rather have that or the deal for Jorge Soler? Let me know down in the comments section below. But the Cardinals, they do all their shopping in one move, getting Fedde and Tommy Pham. They also did trade away Dylan Carlson. The Padres got Tanner Scott, Brian Hoeing, and Jason Adams, so they took care of their bullpen. The Diamondbacks get Josh Bell as an insurance. Josh Bell had just been DFA. They get him as insurance with Christian Walker, hurting his oblique. And they also get AJ Puck, one of the better relievers that was on the market. And the Pirates go out and get Brian De La Cruz, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and a left-handed reliever in Jalen Beeks. I like that for the Pirates. You get a much-needed bat in the outfield. You get some utility, infield, outfield depth in Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and you get a left-handed reliever in Jalen Beeks. Of all those teams, I think I like all of those trade deadlines, better than what the Braves did. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue against that. As much as, look, I like Soler. I'm not trying to say that I hate that move, but there was just a lot more that needed to be done. And the one move you do was basically a salary dump, that you're taking on a lot of money. Yes, you're getting a better player, but there were just so many other holes that this team needed to fill. And look, I don't completely blame Alex Anthopoulos, and I want to get into this more in a moment. There's a lot happening this year, a lot happening against him, a lot happening against the Atlanta Braves. This market was just absolutely crazy. It was certainly a seller's market, especially for pitching. But there were moves that could be made here, and Alex Anthopoulos wasn't able to get it done. I believe Alex Anthopoulos is one of the best GMs in all of baseball. I'm not with these people out here that think that he and Snicker need to be fired. That is not me. But I think this is a failure at the trade deadline. I think he did not do enough to help this team down the stretch. So again, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens the rest of the way. I do believe this team is still very good and has, the potential to do good things. But from what the front office could have done to help this team, I don't think they did enough to help them get there. And now it's going to be on the guys in that clubhouse. And we'll talk more about that in a second. I'll give my official grade for this trade deadline and talk about what could have happened, what should have happened for this Braves team. We'll discuss all of that here next. You shouldn't have to worry when buying tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use GameTime. Been telling you about GameTime for a while. It is the only ticketing app that I use now for whether it's sports, comedy, theater, whatever events it is near you. You can use the GameTime app, and you can use our code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase when you download the GameTime app and create an account. Reason I love GameTime, it is super easy to use. You just open up the app, look for the game you want, look for the price you want. You're going to get an all-in price up front. You know what you're paying for that seat, and you're also going to know what your view looks like from that seat. You can click on it right there in the app. You also get their game time guarantee. That means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. You also get exclusive flash deals, and you can buy tickets right up to GameTime and sometimes a little even after GameTime. And you can do that all in the GameTime app. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so now that we do officially know what the Braves did at the MLB trade deadline, it's time to discuss their grade, how they did, what they should have done. And I got to be honest, this is a D. I mean, if I'm grading this out, this is a D of a trade deadline. This is a failing. Maybe I should give it an F minus. This was a bad trade deadline for the Atlanta Braves. You came into this needing probably two outfield bats, probably needing somebody to help at second base, and probably needing some depth in the rotation. Now, all those weren't necessary. But if you wanted to give this team the best chance of winning, getting into the postseason and winning World Series, I think those four deals had to be made. You made one of them in Jorge Soler, which, look, I like Jorge Soler. He is definitely an upgrade over what the Braves had. He's not the type of hitter that I was looking for. He does get on base, and that's great, but he doesn't hit for average. He's not a contact hitter. He doesn't give you any speed. He shouldn't be in the outfield, but he's going to be. It's just, it feels like a bad trade deadline. It feels like a failure of a trade deadline. And look, there's a lot going. And I see everybody giving their grades in the comment section. AJ Evans gave it a C-. I think that's, that's very generous of you. But a lot of people giving this an F. Again, I think it has to be a failure of a trade deadline just based on what we as fans know. And we're never going to know the specifics, the restrictions that were on Alex Anthopoulos to stay under that third luxury tax. We're never going to know the type of prospects that other teams were asking for from the Braves. Look, you can look at these deals and say, oh, Braves could have beat this deal for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. They could have beat this deal for Brian De La Cruz. You could say that all you want, but you don't know the ask of the other team for Braves prospects. And now you can make some assumptions that say, Braves have this player that is better than that player they gave up. You can certainly do that and make some assumptions, but we don't know. So it's hard to really be too critical of something that we don't know. But just from a fan's perspective, we don't care about money. We don't care about prospects. We care about what you did to make this team better. And you didn't do enough. You did not do enough to make this team better. You have a team that has been treading water for 3 months now. They continually get punished with injuries. Nothing has gone their way. They need some life to turn this thing around. And maybe it is Soler, who was big for them in 2021. I just don't feel like enough was done from the front office to show anything to this team that, hey, I believe in you. Here's some help. Go get it done. Confidence is the word that I was looking at or looking for. I just don't feel like enough was done to show that belief in this team that, hey, I know you've been struggling. I know there's a lot of injuries. Here's some help to get you on track. That being said, this is a failure of an MLB trade deadline for the Braves, just based from a fan's perspective. That being said, you do have a hopefully full rotation here pretty soon with Ronaldo Lopez and Max Fried coming back to pair with Chris Sale, with Charlie Morton, with Schwellenbach. You do have AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop. You do have Ian Anderson, Waskari Noah. You do lay down the list, have Bryce Elder, Alan Winans, guys that can help you get through the regular season. You do have plenty of options in the rotation. I would have loved to have a little bit more depth there because 2 postseasons in a row, they've gone into the postseason with at least 2 pitchers that were injured. You don't know what's going to happen in these last 2 months. And I would have liked something to help prepare for that. You're hoping Ozzie Albies can come back 2 weeks before the end of the regular season and that he can suddenly be Ozzie Albies, who was underperforming this year like many Braves hitters. I feel like you could have gone out and gotten a Luis Rengifo. Angels ended up doing nothing at this deadline, by the way. And, maybe that's just where it hurts the Braves. The Angels just weren't willing to part with any of their players. They want to try to run it back with Mike Trout one more time next year. I don't know, but you could have gone out and gotten, the Rays were trading everybody. You could have potentially gotten a Brandon Lowe to help at second base and in the outfield, but you didn't. And so, again, trying to get back to the positive note, as I've said on here numerous times, whatever you did at the trade deadline, nothing was going to matter if Matt Olson doesn't hit like Matt Olson, if Austin Riley doesn't hit like Austin Riley, if Sean Murphy, Travis d'Arnaud don't hit like they're capable of, if Michael Harris can't come back and be a 280, 290 hitter like he's been the first 2 years of his career, if those things don't happen, none of this really matters. No moves you were going to make at this deadline were really going to have that much of an impact. And none of this matters if Max Fried, Ronaldo Lopez, and or Chris Sale get hurt. If those guys can't stay healthy, I have very little confidence in this team, down the stretch and going into a postseason series. There's just been too many losses. You lose maybe the best player and the best pitcher coming into this season by many people. That's what Spencer Strider and Acuna were viewed as. And that's just hard to overcome. And to overcome all of the regression that we've had this year from players offensively, it was a lot to overcome. And last thing I'll say about this trade deadline, it was a seller's market. Prices were extremely high, but prices were mostly extremely high on pitchers, not on position players. And I think, as Alex Anthopoulos is here saying, we have 5 starters. I get that. Look, I would have been okay not doing anything with the starting pitching side of things, but to not go out and get some more bats and to get some more bats that this lineup needs, the type of hitters that this lineup needs, that to me is just what makes this trade deadline a failure, because those moves were out there to be made and they just weren't made. You could have gotten rid of some prospects to go make these deals happen and not just completely blow up the farm system. Instead, the one deal you chose to make was a player who is like every other hitter you already have in the lineup, a 3 true outcomes type of player who can't play defense, by the way, and you take on a ton of money in the deal. And that's the one deal you make. So it's a bit frustrating as a fan sitting here. But again, all that said, this team, if they play like they're capable of, which we have said all year long, and it has not happened, they still can get things done this year. They still can get to the postseason. They still can make a run in the postseason. I very much believe that. But this was the last chance for the front office to help this team out, to give them some resources to bring some life, kickstart some things, get some energy, some positive energy that this team just hasn't had this year. And in my opinion, they failed at doing that. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Soler is the answer that really just sparks this offense and gets them going. I really hope this team stays healthy the rest of the way and guys start performing like they're capable of. But as this season has been, we all are sitting here with hope. We're all hoping these things work out. And at this point, it just hasn't been the case. But don't lose hope. There's still a long way to go. It's 2 months left in the season. The Braves are in a postseason spot. And with all the other moves that the NL wildcard teams made, I still think the Braves are just as talented, if not more, than those teams. But they got to start playing like they're capable of. Those guys at the top of the order have to start getting it done. And again, hopefully Soler helps with that the rest of the way. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thank you so much for joining. Over 250 in here live with me. Hopefully you enjoyed that trade deadline discussion. We'll be back tomorrow, or on Thursday, actually, with our mailbag episode. Then I'll be out for the weekend. And again, we'll see who the Braves are playing. I know they're not going to be playing the Marlins, but we'll see who they're playing this weekend. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Follow us on social media at @shortstopball, at @LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.